Hey, welcome to the weekend Bucky call. This is August 2021, and we're going to be talking about we're continuing our discussion of Buckminster Fuller's book, Design Discipline, Oblivion or Utopia. It's up to us. And we're going to just help support everybody in getting a good discussion. Basically, Bucky talks about 14 design concepts and dominant concepts to help in design. We are in teleology right now. We're still working on teleology, and as part of teleology is this idea of, and I broke it out a little bit differently, that's in the book, but this is called the design science event flow. So we have teleology, intuition, conception, apprehension, experiment, and feedback over here under subjective. And then we have objective development over here. And this is where he uses the term generalization. We're going to start with that conversation tonight. That's where we're starting with our 14 concepts in teleology right there. So that's what we're doing. So with that little introduction, John Butler, good to have you on the call. How are you feeling today? And what would you like to get out of today's call?
I'm feeling great and grateful. It's a beautiful day in Perth. The sun's shining. I've just had a walk in the park. And we've had a fair bit of rain, actually, recent months and in the last week. The lakes are full, the rivers are full, unlike a lot of the world. So feeling very, very fortunate, and for a whole lot of other reasons. I see so much of Bucky in the things that are happening. The increase in the use of electric vehicles, the increasing price of gasoline, problems with energy and energy generation, just in the news daily. I think, oh yeah, Bucky was talking about that, and Bucky thought about that, and Bucky forecast that. And I think Bucky's increasingly important and relevant to what we're dealing with in the world at the moment. So I'd like to finish today understanding Bucky just a little better. So that's how I'm feeling. That's what I want to take out. Anne, how do you feel, and what do you hope to take out of today?
Hi, John. I feel apologetic, actually. Because last week, I lost track that it was a Sunday. I thought it was a Saturday. I completely missed it. I was like, no. And then, and the next 2 weeks, I won't be around. I'm at an event and traveling at the same time. So that doesn't work well for me, where our calls are concerned, So that's where I'm a bit bummed by. Okay. And then otherwise, everything is good here. I just found something out, actually. I attended this landmark forum a couple of months ago. Okay. And because it was recommended to me by my daughter. Yeah. So I'm sure you all are familiar with that. I find out that it was started by Bucky.
No,
I don't think it was.
Landmark was started by a guy named Werner Erhard.
Yes.
And right at the end of Becky started making his big transition into this comprehensivism, and Werner Erhard picked up on Bucky, became his kind of traveling companion, and did a lot to help him get his word out there, because Bucky was very into his stuff, and Werner Erhard was into communicating on a mass basis. So they worked together.
Right. So, but it was based a lot on Bucky's thoughts and input. Yes.
Yeah. I would say that Werner Erhard is into truth speaking technology. How do I tell the truth and describe my situation? And when he heard Bucky, he said, hey, this is a truth that's got to get out there. So he did what he could to help Bucky get promoted.
Oh, cool to know, because I didn't expect to get a lot out of it, but I got so much out of it, and it was all online, which was really weird as well. Because you don't think that it can translate online well, because you're talking about impacting people, like right here at the heart, in the gut, right? So it has, and my niece is going through it right now, and I can hear, she called me last night, and I could hear that things are opening up for her, and I think things are breaking, some of the things that really need to be broken up, so I'm very, very hopeful there. Another one of my, a few others, we've gone through it. So when I found out about it yesterday, yeah, So I just thought I wanted to check in here. And thank you for the explanation. Yeah, you're right. I read about that, and it was this Warren Earnhardt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he was
Werner Earhart. I'll put it in.
Werner Earhart. Okay, yeah. Werner Earhart. Yeah, and I read that people considered him what he's doing a cult, and I actually looked into it, and it's nowhere near a cult. Cult isolates. Yeah, he is helping build relationships and like people. Yeah. So anyway, I just want to put it out there. We're missing Kelly. If anybody knows what's happening, it'd be cool to find out how he's doing. And Kelly, we miss you. Okay. And that's what I hope to get out today, is to catch up with I'm really interested in that. He started off with, we were at humanity, right? So I stopped at humanity and I wanted the third one and I missed that. So I'm really hoping to catch up on that one. I'm going back to watch that video, but no time yet. So, yep. And Joe, how do you feel and what do you expect to get out of today?
I'm feeling well. A little bit tired, but I feel very good. It's very good to see John and Anne back. It's been a few weeks, so we're sorely missed during that period. I too miss Kelly. I'm sending my best wishes and hope to see him soon. Hope he's well. And I'm really looking forward to this week too, getting into the teleology of where we left off last week. That was actually, it was pretty interesting. And then also getting into some of the other concepts that Bucky used to govern his life, because I think John actually captured it well. He was extremely accurate in a lot of his predictions as to what would, how things and systems would work. And I think, kind of understanding his generalized principles a little bit better will give us the ability to kind of think about how to imagine the most prosperous future. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the exploration this evening. Steve, my friend, how are you doing? And what would you like to take away from today? You look good. You look healthy.
I actually, this is my, I got COVID a week ago Tuesday and had fever 2 nights, and then lost my fever and have been struggling. Last weekend was real tough, but I actually went out and had a full day yesterday. I still kind of get sleepy during the day. I have trouble focusing on the things I'd like to focus. And when I do focus, I feel exhausted. But I made a full day yesterday where I went out and had fun, played in my rock and roll band, visited with my brother. I worked hard today, but I woke up today kind of normally after 7.5 hours of sleep without an alarm. So maybe I'm getting back to into some sense of regularity and productivity that I'm kind of been accustomed to. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for your good wishes. I am all excited about this book. It's amazing how Bucky can be so prophetic. He misses a few marks here or there, but really this understanding spaceship Earth and understanding this concept of us that it's going to take individual accountability to create either utopia or oblivion. And we just seem to be going in both directions simultaneously right now. Wow. There's so much oblivion going on, and there's a little bit of utopia here and there. And if you and I keep making the right choices, maybe that's all there is. Maybe that's all there is. So I'm looking forward tonight and delighted that everybody's here to share. Susan says she's late and she's going to be on her way. Manu says he's not going to be here and he can't make it tonight. And so those are the only 2 emails that I gathered before tonight, and I should have checked more to see if I had more calls, but there we go. Okay. So and John Butler, we've got you here, and so I'm going to flip my magic coin, and if you'd like to continue to read with us, that'd be wonderful.
Of course, I would.
Here's
I think heads or tails. and heads and tails, and John reads with either.
When I flip my coin, it's heads or heads, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So here's the actual book, though. This is the way he has his design science event flow: subjective and then objective down in here. And he has the word generalization here, which is, you know, I'm not sure what a generalized principle is and what general principles are versus generalized principles. I'm still learning that thing. So maybe we'll get that. Maybe we'll get some more understanding on this today. Let's see here. Last time we read through, why don't we start with teleology? All of this is going to be a review.
Sure.
But they drop us into the chart and then we continue from there. So go ahead.
Okay.
And make this
Concept for teleology: the conscious deliberations and decisions of the human mind, which reorganize that subconsciously fed back informations, the philosophic reduction of a plurality of subjectively experienced pattern cognitions into conceptually recognized, imagined patterns of generalized principles to forwardly control specifically anticipated events by designed modifications of environment patterns. Can we do that again?
Yeah, well,
Yes,
in
please.
fact, I think what would be helpful would be to look at the definition of teleology. Hey,
Yeah.
while we're reviewing that again, Joe, would you want to do a Google on teleology and stick it in the chat?
Sure. No
So we get
problem.
the actual dictionary definition, because I think he's actually changing the definition here.
He
Right.
is, yes.
Yeah, he's saying to him, teleology is not what people think it is. This is real teleology. So let's read it again, John, if you want.
Okay, so it's what we consciously, the conscious deliberations and decisions of the human mind,
Right.
which reorganize the subconsciously fed back information. So we
Now,
get.
I don't
subconscious
understand that,
feedback.
right?
That's
That's
a mistake. Yeah, there's a mistake
Yeah.
there.
So what we would do if we were interpreting
Could be
that,
just information, I think.
yeah, unconscious or subconsciously fed back.
Yeah.
So this conscious mind deliberates and reorganizes our subconscious feedback, the information we
That's
get
right.
subconsciously. Okay, good. And let me see if I can get this up a
The-
little bit higher.
Yeah.
Okay,
The philosophic reduction of a plurality of subjectively experienced pattern cognitions into conceptually recognized, imagined patterns of generalized principles to forwardly control specifically anticipated events by designed modifications of environment patterns. So something happens, we get feedback, we bring it to the conscious. We then reduce the plurality into conceptually recognized patterns of generalized principles so that we can plan for the future and change the environment to deal with those patterns.
yeah, to
So
deal with
flooding might be an example. We've had flooding a couple of times, we've got the feedback, so we bring it into our consciousness.
we see it as a pattern.
Yep.
Right.
And then we plan what changes. We're going to build dikes. We're going to move houses. We're going to, there's a town in New South Wales in Australia called Lismore, which has been flooded, I think, 3 times so far this year. And they've now got plans to move the whole town to a different higher site. Because otherwise you're stupid. If you stay there and keep getting flooded,
Yeah,
change the design, you do something.
yeah,
And it happened in another town called Gundagai years ago. They basically moved the town up the hillside after a flood went through the whole town.
yeah,
So things happen, you get feedback, you bring it into your consciousness, you reduce it to subjectively experienced pattern cognitions, and you change it into conceptually recognized patterns of generalized principles, and then you design modifications to
environment patterns.
to plan for the future.
Right. He makes this one statement as kind of I think this is kind of his summary of what teleology means to him. And then we'll look at the definitions Joe stuck in the chat. So go ahead and read that.
But the
Final
interest,
Go ahead.
Generalized,
Prin-
comprehensive. Sorry, Joe. Yes.
I was just gonna say, what is the generalized principle then in that particular instance, that example that we just used?
See, we have these patterns and we conceptually recognize these patterns of generalized principles. That's a clue as to what a generalized principle is.
All
Does
right,
that give you a definition?
so what is the generalized principle in the case of the dam? I'm trying to think.
Of
through
the
this.
flooding.
Of the flooding.
Okay, so you have one flood, that's not a pattern. The moment you've got two, you've got a pattern. When you've had three, you've certainly got a pattern.
Right, right.
So the climate's changed, the weather patterns have changed. We're getting more water here in this area than we've ever had before. It's happened 3 times. We've got to do something. So what are we going to do? Are we going to build dams? Are we going to build dikes?
Okay.
Are we going to move all the buildings? So we start redesigning. We design environmental modifications to plan for the future.
And I think he's saying here that if we see that this particular place floods all the time, that pattern becomes a generalized principle. For all practical purposes, it is a generalized principle. It's a
Okay.
pattern of generalized principle. Maybe, is that what you're seeing?
That's fine. And then what would be the distinction between that and a general principle?
I don't know, generalized means it's been experienced, maybe. What do you guys think?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think I understand where Joe is coming from, because it's true. So are there any generalized principles that we know of that fits into that situation?
We know,
Which of
We know flooding does something, right? That flooding itself as a principle. I mean, I'm
Well,
just
first
trying
of all,
to-
there needs to be a pattern, and then
Right.
the pattern may not be such that we're consciously aware of it. So first of all, there needs to be a pattern, then we need to become consciously aware of it.
is the fact that the people are anti-anthropic a generalized principle, then we are trying to figure out the pattern and create a solution or system to systemize this. I don't know. Would that be a generalized principle?
well, I think flooding he's saying that's a pattern that we generalize. And somehow that's a generalized principle. Flooding is a generalized principle. I think that's what he's saying in that paragraph. One thing that we do know, what he refers to these generalizations in this cosmic hierarchy that we spent so much time on. Here we have embracing and permeating generalizations of generalization. So he's using these terms, cosmic integrity is evidently some kind of generalization. Synergy, nature, unknown, universe, metaphysical. Could we put flooding in that list of generalizations?
No, not that group here.
Generalize into conceptually recognized or imagined patterns of generalized principles. We subjectively experience pattern cognitions into conceptually recognized patterns of generalized principles, so that we can forwardly control anticipated events by designed modification of environmental patterns.
With those 2 definitions that Joe put up, I don't see the first one as being a Bucky definition. Bucky is probably within the second one.
Well, let's look at those definitions. Let's see how I do this. If you go ahead.
I have a question, because I know that over the years, the meeting here, you have created a whole list of generalized principles. Yes. So for me also, I'm trying to figure out what they are. And whenever you all say, okay, this is a generalized principle, I've been writing them down. So there were a couple of months back, we were discussing energy always flows. So that's a generalized principle. And my list is only 4 short. It's just 4.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
So what do you for? What 4 do you have?
I have evolution. Everything in this world in this world has a lifetime or a lifespan. Energy always flows. And the fourth one is energy flows in the line of least resistance. So I'm not sure, because I know y'all have a list, but I'm not sure where to find that list of generalized principles that over the years that you have, or is the table that you showed just now on Bucky talking about generalized principles being, it's inclusive. Was it inclusive? The one that has universe and us, was that the integrity and synergy and so on. Is that the generalized principle? Which I'm quite lost with that.
Goodness. I don't know. He called them generalizations of generalizations. That's what he called them. Generalizations of generalization. And he actually gave it a formulaic code, a GG to the power of n.
Yeah. So when he talks about generalized principles there, what is he referring to? You know, or are we supposed to find the generalized principle out of his definition on teleology? Okay.
Yeah. Here's the definitions. This is what teleology that Joe put in the.
Yeah, one's a theological one, so I'm assuming the second one is really kind of irrelevant.
Well, I think most people think of teleology in terms of purpose.
Well, either that is a common thread, is that teleology, the explanation of the phenomena in terms of the purpose they serve rather than of the cause by which they arise. And that is important to know. Because we tend not to think in terms of purpose.
And if you take this sentence right here, to me, that generalized, comprehensive, and anticipatory design science, I think he's trying to teach us that if we're looking at teleology, we would be looking at, we're not looking at some purpose, some phenomena in terms of a purpose. He would say we're looking at phenomena in terms of a design, based on design science, based on the nature of things, how we generalize those things comprehensively and anticipatorily. I don't know. I mean, I'm just putting his words down here.
Fair enough. I mean, I think that's a good explanation. Where he's taking it outside of, as you'd mentioned last week, he's taking it outside of the philosophical and he's bringing it into the more concrete. I'm just trying to get my head around principles in general.
Me too.
In general, and how do you get to, say, even thinking in terms of first principles versus generalized principles versus general principles? I mean, you know, that all of these terms actually have meanings, and it's very important to at least capture the essence of which each one of them means.
Evidently, we have pattern cognitions. We experience pattern cognitions, and somehow we put them into conceptually organized patterns, and we call those generalized principles to forwardly control specific anticipative events by design modification of environment patterns. I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at it with you. He seems to be trying to change the definition of teleology. Am I the only guy who sees that, or what do you guys think?
No, I think that's right. One of the things Bucky was very big on was meanings and understanding. As he said, he'd rather be not understood than misunderstood.
Right.
And he spent a lot of his time examining the words we used and deciding whether they were accurate. So, for example, he was offended by talking about sunrise because he said the sun's not rising, the sun's not moving. It harks back to a flat earth. When we talk about sunrise, we're misleading ourselves and our children. So he was very big on words and studying them and changing them to get the meaning that he thought was most accurate.
Cool.
So it's not sunrise, it's sunsight.
Yeah.
In the morning, the sun comes into sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's interesting. I just, Googled the generalized principles with Bucky.
Show
And
the screen, Joe. What'd you get?
I did it on my other computer. Hang on.
Well, I got Google right here. I could do something.
Yeah, so just generalized principles, Bucky, and it's interesting that what has come up is, he's talking about the scientific laws that govern the universe, and then he talks about the law of nature that describes interrelationships among systems components.
Wow. Because what you put into Google, generalized principles of Bucky?
Just Bucky, no,
Okay.
of Bucky.
All right,
But
there we
anyway.
go. I got it. I'll show you what I got and tell me if this is what you got, Joe.
Yeah, that's a
Generalized principle is a law of nature that describes interrelationships among system components.
like entropy.
Yeah. Not on my little list of things here.
Anyway,
Okay, maybe we'll get more as we grow here. But basically, this is how he heads up the conversation, and then he drops right into the this event flow. Hang on, here it comes. There it is. And he starts describing this design science event flow. So unless there's more discussion, let's just pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to? Let's look at subjective research first. Let's look at this top. He includes teleology, intuition, conception, apprehension, experiment, and feedback as part of our search research. And interestingly, should there be an end parentheses here? There probably should.
Yes.
And then he has generalization comes from objective development, reduction practice, and regeneration. Anybody want to read those, John, on the right?
Yeah, sure. Objective development, prototyping 1, prototyping 2, prototyping 3, production design, production modification, tooling, production, distribution, installation, maintenance, service, reinstallation, replacement, removal, scrapping, recirculation. That's an interesting. We're talking about industrialization. So we're talking about production of things. We're talking about the prototypes and the modification and then tooling up to produce and then producing. And of course, that's useless without the distribution and the installation and the maintenance. And then the
Regeneration is the most important.
I'm not sure of the difference between reinstallation and replacement.
Yeah.
That's interesting. We maintain something if it needs to be replaced, but what's the difference between reinstallation? So let's take a dishwasher. It's installed, it's maintained, it's serviced. It may need to be replaced, but what's the reinstallation?
Maybe we learned something from reinstalling it.
Or I just think reinstallation could be related to regenerative. So that you pull something out, you you reinstall it, it kind of gets reused in the process.
Go ahead.
Yeah, anyway, I look at it as you perform Well, actually, if you have maintenance though, it's a little hard to make that case. I'm
Well,
sorry.
doesn't this describe Kelly's hose, master hose business? I mean, it seems to me this gave Kelly an outline for developing his business.
Mhm.
And if he could anticipate installation and then maybe anticipate reinstallation, because how many times have you worked on a machine where putting in a belt or putting in a hose is just the most impossible task? So what if you design a new hose where you install it like you normally have to, but you rig it so that your reinstallation process is easier, so that the whole thing leaned towards regeneration rather than scrapping it?
Hmm.
Just thinking out loud. And it seems to me that he's giving us, this is his concept of teleology, that rather than deal with purpose, we deal with actual design. And if I'm going to deal with actual design, these are the terms I have to speak of. I have to be conscious of those things. So let's continue. Any other comments or questions?
No.
Nope.
Okay, there we go. Do you want to read that final paragraph? And I'll be ready to
Yes.
switch it over.
The philosophy of my 14-point strategy derives from my intuition that all experiences may be progressively generalized, and that man thus discovers that only a few principles govern all the multi-rate, non-simultaneous, transformative, interstructuring transformations of non-simultaneous universe.
I think we can take that sentence right there and we can stick it in this little printout thing with generalize where we, it fits on this page, it seems to me.
Hey,
The
I'm just happy
philosophy-
John was here to read it.
Yeah. Passage.
My mind's going, what?
Yeah, that's just it.
Exactly right.
That's all I didn't think about anything else other than that.
Yeah. So that all experiences may be progressively generalized.
Realized. Yep.
That seems to be a key to understanding generalized principles and generalized principles. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
you can start wherever you want.
Only a few principles govern all the multi-rate, non-simultaneous, transformative, interstructuring transformations of non-simultaneous universe. What the heck does that mean?
Okay, non-simultaneous universe is your experience and it's the experience of every human being. I would say that's what his definition of non-simultaneous universe is.
Okay, that it makes sense. Transformative in structuring transformations. Those are specific types of interactions?
Yeah, he even goes on to say here, it becomes obvious that subjectively apprehended data. Once again, this goes back to non-simultaneous universe, right? Which is you have a universe, I have a universe, each of us have our universe, and it's non-simultaneous.
Right.
And it becomes obvious that subjectively apprehended data
Transforms.
intellectually recognized data, interrelationships concerning the abstracted principles. Boy, it's just so hard to read what he's saying here.
I know.
Yeah, he's definitely not a poet.
Governing, evoluting universe provide the individual with high potential for the objective realization
Of advantages.
for humanity. Okay, yes. So if we are conscious and we are observing, then we have the opportunity to apply our observations to improve for the benefit of humanity.
And look, there he defines teleology. So we can go back over to our little words.
Wait a minute. We go again?
Yeah.
Where?
I'm going to stick it right here. Blam. Whoop. I'm going to change and make sure the font's consistent. Right there. I'm going to come back. Here's his definition of teleology, Joe.
Okay.
John just read it. John, do you want to read it again?
Yeah, sure. Teleology means the intuitive conversion by brain and mind of special case subjective experiences into generalized principles and their subsequent objective employment in special case undertakings.
Okay, that's his definition. Teleology means the intuitive conversion by brain and mind of special case subjective experiences into generalized principles and their subsequent objective employment in special case undertakings. In other words, we're going to, like back what he said up here, is we're going to modify the environment. We're going to modify some pattern. I guess that was up here. This is where the philosophic reduction of a plurality of subjectively experienced pattern cognitions. In other words, you and I have our experience of the universe, and each of us have our conceptually recognized, imagined patterns of generalized principles, and we're applying those to forwardly control in the future specific anticipated events like that flooding you talked about, John.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we're going to control it is by designed modifications of environment patterns.
Yep.
Thus, teleology means the intuitive conversion by brain and mind of special case subjective experiences, which is just basically each human has an experience, right?
Right.
No, don't put "and," put experiences.
Okay,
Take
good.
out the word "and" and put an S on experiences, because it's got to be plural.
Yep, good for you.
So one experience can't do this.
Right on.
Mm.
And somehow we're going to concatenate those into generalized principles.
And then we have to employ them.
Yeah.
You don't
And
just think about it, you do something. You use
Yes.
design to change the environment.
in a
Yes.
special case scenario.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Hmm.
What do you guys want to see next? Shall we continue? Or
Yeah, sure.
all right.
Oh dear.
I think we left off right here.
Hmm. The discovered principles we're up to, aren't we? Yes.
Right.
That's correct.
The discovered principles governing the intertransformative structuring of universe permit the subconsciously teleological and conscious design initiating individual to reform the environment in such a manner as to provide ultimately higher advantage for men, and in such a manner as to regenerate in other individuals the drive to further transform the environment to even higher advantage for all. Okay. The
Yes, yeah.
design may increase the degrees of freedom of individuals by reducing environmental interferences, or it may decrease freedoms, as with traps and prisons. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's a good example? I suppose the development of the spacesuit. You weren't going to be able to send human beings into space without a design which enabled them to still live and function in a very different environment.
Wow.
So that increased the degrees of freedom of individuals by reducing environmental interferences, i.e. death.
That is a great example.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of my pet peeves with Bucky, of course, he was a 60s guy, right?
I know.
And this
Yes,
whole
of
idea,
men, yeah.
Spaceship Earth. Yeah.
if he were to say the
Few
people,
beings, as
if
Kelly
he
would
said few
say.
beings or the people,
Yeah.
he could have said anything more than for men and for mankind. He's very chauvinistic in that regard,
Yes.
but you got to give him a break because, you know,
It's times. It's yeah. You have to. You know.
he came through the 30s and 40s. You know?
Exactly.
Any other comments or questions?
may decrease freedoms as with traps and prisons.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you a good example. The Great Wall of China.
Okay.
So the Chinese were constantly raided by barbarians from outside of the Chinese Empire. So an emperor decided to change the environment. He would build the Great Wall of China, a fairly significant undertaking, which wasn't a trap or a prison, but what it did was it reduced the freedom of the barbarians to sweep into China and rape, pillage, and plunder. So you would regard that as an example of teleology.
Yeah.
I have one for education.
Yes.
Schools.
Yes.
Decrease freedom. And
Yes.
because too many students have actually described their schools as prisons.
But are you aware of the origins of that, Anne?
You mean of schools?
The Prussians. You
Yeah,
realise
the
the
Prussian
reasons
school
were built?
system. Yeah.
Because they wanted to reduce the influence of parents and increase the influence of the state over children, and to produce more factory workers and soldiers
And
rather
good
than leaving them on
citizens.
the farms with their parents or in the shops with their parents.
Very true.
Prior to that, the child was brought up within the family and the child learned whatever the parents knew. So if they were farmers, the child learnt to farm. If they were shopkeepers, the child learnt to work in a shop. But following the French Revolution, the Prussian nobility decided they didn't want a repeat of the French Revolution in Prussia, and they were pretty intelligent. So they designed a compulsory school system to reduce the influence of parents and to increase the influence of the state. And you didn't know that?
No wonder.
To avoid another French Revolution.
But it also led to specialization as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Very much so. That's where, everybody, the way the classrooms were even structured as
But
far
there's so
as
much goes back to the
sorting by
Prussians.
age and everything.
Yeah. Dewey studied in Germany. Many of the early better educated Americans were educated in Germany. They did graduate or postgraduate studies in Germany. And so the German education system had a very big influence far beyond Germany, particularly in the United States.
Wow.
And yet the United States has one of the poorest quality education systems in the world. The average school in the United States is terrible.
Okay, you've just blown this whole thing wide open with that sharing, because we've always felt that what we've been doing in our school is to free the kids. To free the kids. So my hair is standing right now. So when so they've been always talking about feeling like it's prison over and over again. Doesn't matter which country I go to, most kids feel that school is like a prison, right? And it also, because as Joe was talking earlier as well about the observations, right? And I realized that what came out from what we have been doing has been observing things that just didn't make sense. First and foremost is that, it doesn't make sense for kids to be miserable at school. Not at all. How can we even be accepting of kids being miserable at school for 11 years of their lives, and they're spending like anything between 6 to 10 hours, in education that feels like prison, and in misery. Then the other thing that we were observing was that, the bell curve is stupid, right? For education, because it keeps shifting, right? And so parents are fighting for the A's and the A stars, and yes, everybody is getting better, but then you know what? The bell curve
that's Asian, and that's more Asian than
Yeah,
Western. Because
actually,
my wife was an educator. My wife started off in early childhood, teaching children in school, and she was very determined to, and generally successful in making it fun for the children, an exciting environment where they were encouraged to want to learn. Then she moved into primary education. Then she moved into adult training, including some training for teachers, and then into accelerated business programs, Money and You, Business School for Entrepreneurs. And then she worked throughout Asia, Taiwan, China, Malaysia, Singapore, running those accelerated business programs.
Yeah.
So, accelerated learning, all those sorts of things. And the whole intention was to make learning a fun experience.
Yes, we understand that, John. And the thing is that, but we are the minority, And so when I traveled around, this is happening in so many countries, like literally all the countries in Asia. Only the kids who have access to this education, and I know that it is like less than 1%, okay, as to what you're talking about, right? And so Asian countries, and I realized I saw the same thing in talking to people in the Middle East and South America, Central America, the whole of Africa, and except for that less than 1%, yeah, and many countries in Europe, and that's a heck of a lot of world where the children are going through this very thing that we're talking about. And anyway, I'm in discussions with Julian and Raffers on the entrepreneur program that they're doing over there in Colombia, and we're going to see what we can get out of this. So, but my point is there's so much to observe it, and when you observe it, it doesn't make sense to carry on. So, what we have done is we have taken the West, right? The West, and in US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and the UK, in many ways, the changes are happening there, right? But that's not the rest of the world,
No. And it's too little and too slow.
Yes, it's way too slow. So now that when you explain that, and everybody is following the West when it was following, as you said, Dewey brought it over to the US, and that's what everybody's following in the other parts of the world when the West has changed. All right. So it's okay. Anyway, you just blew it wide open for me. Let me see how to get that message out there. All right.
If you check in the chat, and I just placed a couple of things in there that talk a little bit about the Prussian education system, and one of the founders of that is Johann Gottlieb Fichte, I believe.
Oh, right.
Good German pronunciation.
Was it?
Yeah, Johann Gottlieb Fichte, or Fichte.
Fichte.
Almost an SH, but it's more of a Fichte. Good job.
Yeah. So yeah, he was a major influence on the way schooling is done today. Yeah, there's years ago, and I mean years ago, when I was just in high school, I was reading about this because I was just wondering why school was the way it was. And I was actually just having a conversation with somebody today about how, well, put it this way, I wasn't talking about this particularly, but my grandfather was thrown into life a little bit early. His father died at a very young age. So he was, 12 or 13. So he had to figure it out. And he, figured it out. And part of that was that it was life experiences. And I would have definitely been better off learning through life experiences if rather than going through the traditional system, going through the steps that I thought that I was supposed to go through. Specifically, working for whether one of these big firms or whatever it may be, just wasn't my thing. It would have been much better, much more beneficial for me to, figure out how to create something, how to work with something, how to work with land, how to work with something real within the context of education. But in any case, just some thoughts.
Thank you for that. I've just recorded down the things that you have shared into my documents. Okay, I'll check into that. Thank you so much.
Look closely into that. That's a very important time. They've changed schools, the way schools are function throughout the world.
Okay.
And you familiar with John Taylor Gatto? Anne?
No. Nope.
An American
No.
award-winning teacher who wrote a book called Dumbing Us Down.
Yes. Oh, yes. I have his book.
Hmm.
Yes. And absolutely right. They dumb it down all the way to kindergarten level, especially in Asia. My God. And I also realized because, in the US, you have your community college I can't recall in Australia, in Canada, what you have, but in Australia, you have your, it starts with a T, for people who are not academically inclined.
TAFE, tertiary and further
TAFE,
education.
that's right, TAFE.
Yeah,
TAFE, and UK has got the city and guild, right? So because of those programs, it didn't matter whether, like in those countries, people are more accepting of the fact that, oh, okay, you don't have to be academically strong. And I realized that it's missing in a lot of the other countries that are very, very theoretical academically. They did not have those programs that become and held in high regard. In Asia, like Malaysia, if you don't fall into the category of academically strong, anything else you do that has to do with vocation, then you're considered like really below standard, and you're looked down upon, and so on. And people actually treat each other that way when they work.
I was speaking to somebody from Switzerland recently, and they were saying that as opposed to Australia, because they were quite familiar with both systems, a far smaller percentage go into university. Their equivalent to our TAFE, their vocational training is far, far, far superior and far more widespread. So, for example, now in Australia, you want to become a nurse, you do a degree in nursing at university. In Switzerland, that's still part of vocational training. So whether you want to be a chef or you want to be a nurse or whatever, it's all part of the vocational training. You don't have to go to university to do it. So they haven't added extra emphasis. If you go to university, that's okay. If you don't, there's lots of fantastic opportunities for you at the vocational training level.
Yep, you're right. The Scandinavian countries, like Finland, they have actually asked us to recruit nurses for Finland, and they get to live there and work in the hospitals over there, and they can bring the whole families over. The other country that's really strong in all this is Netherlands and Germany. But in Asia, I think maybe over here, if we could look into this in this group here, the word vocation has to change in many countries in Asia because it's just not accepted at all. The minute you touch on the word vocation. So we have figured out on two words in replacement, and unless we replace it that way, parents are not going to accept it, So somebody pointed out to me that they said, and you're using your when you call it entrepreneurship, it's actually vocation, right? So now entrepreneurship is sexy in Asia. Other word, yes, and the other word I realized we need to change vocational into is professional, because it is training for a profession. I know it is going to overlap with engineering and medicine and all that, but we're talking about, somebody was mentioning, like you can't get a welding program in Malaysia. Like, our level of skills here is so low, but what you need is like level 6 welding, or level 6, I think they mentioned, where you have to do welding of oil rigs underwater, and that one you can get in the Philippines. So I think it has to change, that we're talking about profession at that highest level. So anyway, this is really powerful, having this call every Sunday. And now it's just getting the word out there in our, starting with our country, but our country is really slow. And particularly, this one I have to share something, the color of our skin makes a difference, whether people listen to you by the government. Yeah. Okay, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay. we can continue reading if that's what everybody, any other
Yes,
comments?
yes.
Okay, good. We just read about these discovered principles, increasing or decreasing freedoms, and we can continue from here.
C.H. Waddington, Universities of Edinburgh geneticist, speaks of the epigenetic landscape in identifying the powerful effects on human behaviour played by environmental factors.
Okay,
Mhm.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah, can I just do that again? C.H. Waddington, comma, Universities of Edinburgh geneticist, comma, speaks of the epigenetic landscape in identifying the powerful effects on human behaviour played by environmental factors. Well, yeah, that's fair enough. Waddington shows how beings and other factors alter the environment and how the altered environment alters human and other biological behaviours and how the whole process becomes regeneratively and continually interaccelerates. Yes.
how the whole process becomes regenerative,
Yep.
better or for worse, and
Mhm.
continually
Continually
interaccelerates.
interaccelerates.
So
Well,
we
it's
have
not,
to-
it's only good if it's regenerative. Like
no, I
if
think
it's
you-
No, but
not,
being regenerative isn't necessarily good.
yeah, not necessarily good. We eat a bunch of crap food that affects our epigenetic code. Then we have kids who now have their epigenetic code affected, so they're more susceptible to crap food.
that's not
And-
regenerative though.
And we give them a mobile phone at 12 months
Yeah.
of age to enable them to occupy themselves and entertain themselves.
Yeah, but
So that they are completely addicted
So-
to,
Regenerative doesn't necessarily have to be positive, does it?
no,
I thought it does, like in
No.
the sense that if you're talking, I mean, it can regenerate, right? But it may not regenerate what you want, but truly being regenerative is something that doesn't degrade the environment, the individual, or anything. That's
It-
the way I look at regenerative.
well, I don't think
Otherwise-
regeneration is necessarily an improvement or a positive thing.
yeah, so cancer is regenerative.
Mm.
The action or process of regenerating or being regenerated, in particular, the formation of new animal or plant tissue.
Mm.
That could be cancer.
Yeah, it can be.
Cancer is regenerative. So I think what Bucky's saying here profoundly is that just like the degrees of freedom can either reduce environmental interferences or they can cause traps and prisons, he's saying the same thing about human beings interacting with the environment, environment interacting with human beings, creating a thing where in America we have such obesity because we eat crap foods, our bodies aren't healthy. And that is a regenerative process that's very destructive.
And-
Then how do you bring in degenerative then? Degenerate. Wouldn't that be the opposite of regenerate?
No, degenerative is a part of regenerative.
Yeah.
Or is regenerative growing, whether it's good or bad? Degeneration is destruction, good or bad.
Well,
Yeah.
we normally think of it
Yeah,
that way, but cancer
that's-
regenerates itself.
Well, that's good for cancer.
That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
I mean,
People are
regardless, it may not be good for us, but I'm just
That's right.
saying
Is
it's
de-
still a positive for the cancer itself.
it's regenerative for the cancer and degenerative on the human beings that have it.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
America, we've got kids, our kids are susceptible to type 2 diabetes. 30% of our kids have type 2 diabetes, which was unheard of 40 years ago. It's just because they're crap food they're eating.
Mm.
And it affects their epigenetics. I don't know if you guys know what epigenetics is. Epigenetics is the code around the genes that actually turn genes on and off, relating to or arising from non-genetic influences on gene expression.
You know,
Epigenetic
epigenetic
carcinogens.
carcinogens. Yeah.
Right. What does epigenetic mean? Epigenetics is a study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. Unlike genetic changes, epigenetic changes are reversible and do not change your DNA sequence, but they change how your body reads a DNA sequence.
Oh.
I'll put that over on the list of definitions over here from tonight. And it looks like we're going to go on. Of course, that's 16 points. So if I drop all these down a little bit, then that means I can get a little bit more on that page. So I will put that in there while we're reading. I'll put it in behind.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Shall we continue?
Yes.
All righty, good. Where did you leave off, John?
Interaccelerates. He does
right.
not show or suggest that the environment alters man's physical organism, or that the environment adds capabilities to the human being's innate capabilities, but does not indicate the way in which arbitrarily favourable changes in the environment may permit a higher percentum of realizations and development of the innate human brain, body, and mind capabilities, theretofore inactive, only because frustrated by unfavourable regenerative alterations of the environment. Oh,
yeah. And here he puts the adjective on it, unfavorable regenerative alterations.
Alterations of the environment, yep.
So here he's acknowledging that we can have unfavorable regenerative alterations.
Yep. He does not show or suggest that the environment alters human being's physical organism, or that the environment adds capabilities to the human being's innate capabilities, but does not indicate the way in which arbitrarily favourable changes in the environment may permit a higher percentum of realizations and development of the innate human being brain, body, and mind capabilities, theretofore inactive, only because frustrated by unfavourable regenerative alterations of the environment.
Comments?
The change isn't necessarily good.
Right.
Yep.
You wanna
Okay, it's much clearer here.
Yeah, you want to finish the paragraph, John?
Thus, we see that human being evolution is not confined to organic life alone, but also consists of reciprocal interactions of all the combined transformations of the environment and all it contains. Okay. So we are influenced by our environment, and there are reciprocal interactions as a result of the combined transformations. This combined regenerative evolution has not attained a chain reaction rate around the surface of the spherical spaceship Earth.
I don't understand that last sentence.
I think he's concerned that at some point there could be a chain reaction rate in all this unfavorable regenerative alterations.
Or we
I
haven't.
think that there is a chain reaction rate.
No,
There is,
not
but
yet.
we have not yet attained it, he thinks.
Yeah.
But-
So, for example, if we suddenly started to realize that what we're doing is destroying the planet and each other, and there was a pop took place, so there was a chain reaction in realization, and people generally did what he said we need to do, which is combine to work together for the benefit of the planet and all of humanity.
Okay.
That chain reaction hasn't occurred. In fact, we've got good people doing good things and trying to help other people. We've got other people trying to destroy countries and kill people and take the resources they think are scarce for themselves.
Right.
And,
I was just thinking of it like in cause and effect kind of thing, but that's sort of.
well, in terms of cause and effect, I just want to come back to this epigenetic code thing. because my kids have a couple of my kids have type 2 diabetes. In other words, they ate so much sugar when they were a kid, their genes, their body were conditioned to react to sugar in a way that affected their insulin and the way their body actually processes nutrients. And so that's, and in America, we have this diabetes of this epidemic of young kids getting type 2 and type 3 diabetes that 40 years ago, it never happened. It's because of the food we put in our environment and the way that affected our genetic code. Epigenetics, think of epigenetics as you see an electric wire, and then you have this rubber around the electric wire. So epigenetics is kind of a casing that goes around each of the genes, but it's not just a casing. It actually turns things on and turns things off. So if you come from an athletic family and you're a little infant born in that family, and if you got the right genes and inherited the right epigenetic code, your tendency is to be athletic. Now you can say, I'm not going to exercise today, I'm going to read a book. And you can actually change your epigenetic tendencies by making choices in your behavior. Bucky was way ahead of his time because he was talking about this in 65, and it wasn't until Bruce Lipton and a few other guys in the early 70s started to make a big deal about epigenetic code. And so I've studied a little bit about this epigenetic code. And you can actually turn your genes on and off. You can, in fact, I remember now, this is coming back to me, that a particular gene, for example, this metaphor may not be exactly medical. I wish that Susan were here, but there's a gene for a particular cell in the body. If one epigenetic code affects that gene, it can become a skin cell. If a different epigenetic code affects that gene, it can become a brain cell. And if a different epigenetic code affects that gene, that same cell with that gene could become a muscle cell. All because of the coding that's telling that gene to turn on or turn off or do this or do that. And Bucky was way ahead of his time talking about epigenetic code back in 1965.
Just a couple of things that you've prompted me to think of. My understanding, Steve, is that there was huge production of corn in the US many, many years ago, and they didn't have a market for it.
Right.
So they started producing corn syrup and corn as a source of sweeteners.
Yes.
To use the corn to provide a market for it.
And ethanol.
At about the same time, people decided that fat was unhealthy, and therefore fat was often replaced with sugar. If you say our foods and our drinks became saturated, especially in the US, with sweeteners that have triggered this obesity and susceptibility to disease, particularly diabetes. And so the response to a glut of corn and no market was to find another use, which was an artificial sweetener. And almost everything has corn or corn syrup, or a huge number of things. Have it in, we don't even realize it.
I don't think you were exaggerating. Almost everything.
No, it's very, and even if the minute you take the fat out of something, what happens? There's no taste.
That's right.
So what are you going to do? You're going to have to replace it with something. You're going to have to replace it with sugar. And I mean, and essentially in order to give it taste, it's absolutely one of the whole idea of the low fat diet is one of the great, like, lies that has been perpetrated on the American public.
And it is unfavorably regenerative. It just builds on itself and builds on itself.
Yeah, that's true. Try and break that. Try and beat, back the sugar lobby and Pepsi Cola. Good luck.
Yeah.
That would really take, that would take.
Are they nearly as strong as the NRL, are they?
I think that I think the sugar lobby probably has more influence than any other lobby in the United States.
Yeah.
Because of it's not just the sugar lobby, it's everything it touches.
Yeah, well, it's the corn lobby. It's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's everything, all the whole
Yeah.
Midwest. And then every Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, everything.
Right on. I think we can tackle a new concept here.
I think so
You
too.
ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Concept 5, reform the environment. Don't attempt to reform man. An adequately organized environment will permit humanity's original innate capabilities to become successful. Politics and conventionalized education have sought erroneously to mold or reform humanity, i.e. the collective individual. See, Anne, this is all your fault.
Yeah,
All education.
it's good you're here this week.
Yeah, this is a good week for Anne to be here.
But this is exactly what you were saying earlier, Anne.
Yes.
If we can reform the environment in which we educate, if we can make it stimulating and attractive and have kids wanting to come to school and wanting to learn, by reforming the environment, we will reform human beings.
Yeah.
We're on.
Yeah, this is a really powerful quote right here. If it weren't quite in so much Bucky ease, you know, politics and conventionalized education have sought erroneously to mold or reform students. You know,
Mhm.
that's what politics and conventionalized education has done. And and this idea of molding or reforming a student is this idea of a collective individual, and that's what you're absolutely against. Is you're promoting and individuality and that kind of creative individual being, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's continue.
Reform the environment, not human beings. Each of my 14 concepts and their teleologically engendered strategies tend to illuminate the interdependence of all the items. For instance, my item 5 is taken in consideration of all the first 4, but goes on to make the distinct point that may philosophy and strategy confine the design initiative to reforming only the environment in contradistinction to the almost universal attempts of human beings to reform and restrain other humans by political.
Hang on. Political
actions, laws, and codes. This restraining begins with the earliest parental attempts to reform their children's spontaneous behaviours in order to conform them to accepted standards and codes. The reforming of others is subsequently manifest in attempts of grown-ups to reform other grown-ups' patterns through politically enacted law.
Wow.
Whoa, that's very topical at the moment. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the US.
Yeah, sure.
Especially this woke consciousness.
What does woke mean? I see it everywhere, but what does it actually mean?
Well, Jordan Peterson was in Canada. The Canadian Parliament tried to pass a law requiring people to use certain pronouns when referring to gay people and to bisexual people, and they created like a whole lexicon of pronouns, and they were going to make it a law. And Jordan Peterson stood up and said, BS, I will call you what you asked me to call you out of respect when you requested me, but don't try to change the law. And Jordan Peterson went nose to nose with the parliament and got the law defeated. And this whole idea of woke is this idea of like LGBTQ2 plus whatever, you know, and that's why certain actors have been banned from TV shows. Certain people haven't been, like certain speakers have been banned from speaking on college campuses because the woke folks say, well, to hear about that concept is offensive to me, therefore let's limit free speech. So the woke culture seems to be about limiting free speech. That's the way I understand it. Any other comments or questions on that? Any other interpretations?
I mean, it's an ideology. it's supposed to be, just basically, it's really meant towards, it was originally used towards racial issues, but it's been associated more with its complete intolerance of any other opinion. And that's kind of where it's been identified.
At first, it was a really nice popular movement. It was to alert about injustices in our culture, but has become a weapon.
Mm.
To silence people. Yeah.
Yeah, to silence people.
Yeah.
Jordan
So-
Peterson has been canceled.
Well, even President Barack Obama said it was ridiculous. So, I mean, it's not like.
So these definitions are all like 5 years old. That's not the current definition, because right now there's a very negative twist on
Yeah,
it.
it's gotten much. It's much worse.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Mm.
All right. So where are we now?
My experience teaches me that all philosophic concepts which are translated only into bright ideas as voiced or written suggestions or criticism are abortions of intellect's higher potentials. My experience teaches me that philosophic conclusions, which are always teleologically derived, may always be reduced to design science changes of the environment, which can permit other individuals spontaneous realizations of higher destiny,
Right.
i.e. behaving unconsciously in more effective manner. For instance, a turn in the highway may be banked angularly so that poor drivers or drunken drivers will negotiate even sharp radius turns subconsciously due to the fact that the banked angles and gravity together affect the motor car's steering wheel linkages in such a manner that the cars steer themselves around the turns. In the same way, highway overpasses allow automobilists to that's not subconsciously, is it? Supposed to be subconsciously?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be subconsciously avoid crossing collisions.
Right on. Does anybody know what philosophic means?
No.
Nope.
No idea.
Yeah, another new word to learn.
It doesn't seem to be a word.
It doesn't seem to be a word.
Yeah. It's perhaps supposed to be philosophically.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Really?
Yeah.
Would make
Teaches
more
me
sense,
that
I think.
philosophic conclusions, which are always teleologically derived, may
That's
always
definitely
be reduced to
philosophic.
design.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
definitely philosophic. Okay, cool. All right. Very cool. Let's
Yeah, that
continue.
should be an S rather than a D. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think we can hit this next paragraph.
You want me to read it?
I can read it.
I can read it.
I'll read it. John, you've done such a great job, and I see you. It's so easy to look over your shoulder. And in speaking of reforming the environment of man or human beings, I include a surgeon's operations on the human body, for the latter is mobile environment of the brain. I contrast the reform of the integral or deployed physical environment in contradistinction to, to legal or verbal attempts to reform human beings' behavior patterns. I'm going to read that again.
Yeah.
So if you see some word that's incorrect, let me know. In speaking of reforming environment of human beings, I include a surgeon's operations on the human body, for the latter is mobile environment of the brain.
Yep.
I contrast the reform of the integral or deployed physical environment in contradistinction to legal or verbal attempts to reform human beings' behavior patterns.
I think he's saying surgery to improve the health of the body is okay, but not legal or verbal attempts to reform a person's behavior patterns.
Okay, good. He and Jordan Peterson agree. I think you're exactly right, and I'm not sure how you got there because I'm still trying to read that damn sentence.
It's
me
not
too.
an easy sentence.
So thank you for seeing the forest in spite of the trees. I find that there are two ways in which the environment may be altered to affect human beings, one positive and the other negative, i.e., one may decrease the degrees of
I think
freedom.
that should be that. One, Matt.
Well, I think it's may decrease.
Oh, yes, one may decrease. Yes.
The degrees of freedom of humanity negatively by prisons, traps, and straitjackets, and positively by inventing better shoes for human beings' feet.
Hmm.
The normal speed of universal formulations and transformative events in 700 million miles per hour. The normal speed of universal formulations and transformative events is 700 million miles per hour. Wow, I wonder where he come up with that. Man's thus far attained top speed of physical self-transport is 15,000 miles per hour. Does anybody know how fast the sun is moving in the environment, in the galaxy?
No.
No.
I think the sun is moving at 250,000 miles per hour. How fast does the sun orbit in the galaxy? Or we may say move through the galaxy. Move through the galaxy, bam. Whoa, it's 200 kilometers per second or 448,000 miles per hour. Even at this rapid speed, the solar system would take 230 million years to travel all the way around the Milky Way.
Actually,
So
it just suddenly occurred to me is which direction is the whole the sun moving, you know? I mean, we know we are orbiting around the sun, but is there a path for the sun? Just suddenly occurred to me. Nobody ever talks about that.
oh, I've actually shown it on this thing. Here's a great video right here that shows the motion of the sun. Let's see if I can, there it is. Come on. Oh, we don't want to do Fauci. Come on.
Does that mean it has a set path?
What's
so
that?
that we don't does that mean that it has a set path? Or
Does
is
it
it
mean-
that the sun has a set path?
Yes, it does. If when you look at a picture of the Milky Way, it's a giant spiral and it's moving counterclockwise. And the sun is moving in that spiral around the center of our galaxy, which is a black hole, a big giant black hole.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
And this is a really good, I got too much crap open here. See, Forbes is trying to get me to subscribe. They don't want to, and I know this is out here. If I go to YouTube, let's see, we'll go sun moving through galaxy. And I think this is it right here. This is my favorite one. And this is actually
eliminate ear ringing and reverse hearing loss
this
by
is
playing
actually
this odd game
Bucky's
before bed.
concept of
Did
precession.
you know that hearing impairments have nothing?
Here we go. Oh, good grief.
I was about to say that, so it has to do with hearing loss?
Yeah, and I have to pick the Arabic one.
Jesus.
So let's see here.
It's actually just as clear.
Maybe. Let's try this one. I picked the one in Arabic. Can you
But
believe
this time
that?
we're going to do this a little bit more realistically in terms of the actual inclinations of the sun, the earth, and so on. In other words, we're going to try to recreate the motion of our entire solar system relatively realistically using Universe Sandbox. Let's try this, and welcome to the math.
Looks like it might be clockwise.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Now, you might have seen a lot of other YouTube videos where the motion of the sun is presented across the galaxy as a kind of a simulation that you see on the screen right here. Although I'm yet to see at least one of these videos where the actual inclinations and the actual positioning of the planets and, of course, the star is accurate. However, this animation is relatively accurate, although the angles are not really presented. So let's try to recreate this using the newly updated Universe Sandbox, where the galaxies do look quite interesting and quite beautiful. So first of all, we need to start with the distance of where the sun is located compared to the central region of the galaxy, and of course compared to the Sagittarius A-star black hole right there in the middle. And the common analysis suggests that the distance here is roughly around 25,500 light years away from the black hole. This number might change in the future, and it has changed in the past, but right now we believe it's around 25,500. So we're going to place our sun somewhere in one of these arms at a distance of just over 25,500 light years. And so here it is, at a distance of 25,500 light years. Sagittarius A-star black hole is right there in the middle, and this is the so-called Milky Way. But the problem here is that the sun actually doesn't spin in the same plane as the galaxy. As a matter of fact, when the sun spins, the north pole of the sun points this way, and it forms an angle of roughly around 60 degrees with the so-called galactic plane. In other words, we're going to have to take our sun and make it rotate by roughly around 60.2 degrees. And so right here, you can kind of see how the sun spins almost on the side as it travels in this direction across the galaxy. So if we were to zoom out, this is sort of what it looks like on the larger scale of things. And the sun is going this way, while its north pole, also known as the north ecliptic pole, is pointing that way. And the angle right here between the galactic plane and the ecliptic plane, or the plane of the sun, is roughly around 60.2 degrees. And so technically, to see the planet spinning now, we have to kind of spin our head 60 degrees, but this is not it. This is actually not the end of the complexity, because the planets also don't spin on the same plane as the plane of the solar rotation. In other words, there's still a little bit of a difference between the rotation of the sun and also the plane where the planets are. So now we're going to add a little bit of complexity to this. And luckily for us, planet Earth is the easiest planet to start with here, because it actually lies in the same plane of orbit as the so-called ecliptic plane. In other words, the angle between the orbit of Earth and the galactic plane is roughly around 60.2 degrees as well. However, as Earth orbits the sun, it orbits on this so-called ecliptic plane, and luckily for us, it is almost 0 degrees. But the rotational axis of Earth is shifted, as you can see, by roughly around 23.4 degrees, and this is why we get seasons. So it does get a little bit more complicated, because now we have to obviously rotate our Earth a little bit to give it that 23.4 degree rotation of axes. And so now we have three so-called norths. We have the ecliptic north, which is formed by the sun and the solar plane itself. We have the galactic north, which is formed by the galaxy, and it's up, as you would call it here in this simulation. And lastly, we have the celestial north, which is formed by Earth, and it's pointed slightly differently as well. The angle between the celestial north, or Earth north, and the galactic north is roughly around 63 degrees. The angle between Earth and the sun is 23 degrees, and lastly, the angle between the sun and the galactic plane is about 60 degrees. Here's a brief summary of all of this, and yeah, it does get kind of complicated. This is probably why most of those YouTube simulations weren't really able to simulate all of this together. Now, this is just for Earth, right? We have 7 other planets. And if I did all 7 planets, this video would probably be about an hour long. Maybe one day we'll do that, but not today. Today, we're just going to cheat and place all of them by placing all of the 8 planets, starting with the terrestrial planets, in a relatively similar plane to Earth. We're not going to bother with the actual spin right now because it's not really that important. We just want to see how all of this moves across the galaxy. Later on, maybe we'll do this a little bit more realistically. So this is what we're going to do. So here we need to try to align everything with what we have. This is kind of what all of this will look like. So Jupiter now is in the same plane as other planets and is going to be moving this way just as it does in real life. Let's do the same for the remaining 3 planets to make this beautiful solar system inclined as it should be, with approximately 60-degree inclination to the galactic plane and with all the objects moving as they should be moving. So now we're going to run the simulation. Also, let's enable trails here so you can actually see what all of these planets will be doing as they move around the sun. So this right here is a lot more realistic in terms of the inclinations, in terms of the actual positioning of the planets, and in terms of the actual motions around the galaxy. So in reality, this is what all of this looks like, with the sun obviously spinning on its side with a 60-degree inclination. Now, all of this is actually kind of fun to try to recreate in Universe Sandbox, and all of this looks super amazing with the new update. There is, however, one problem with the new update, and this is something that Universe Sandbox is not going to be able to resolve anytime soon because the dark matter is no longer here. And if we look at the time it takes for the sun to orbit a single time around the galaxy, basically the so-called galactic year, it is unfortunately going to be a little bit off. Here it says it's about 85 million years. In reality, it's close to about 220 million years. And until we can actually find a way to simulate galaxies using both dark matter and regular matter, we're not going to be able to create anything super realistic. But for now, it's not really that important. This is what the important part is. This is what all of this looks like as the solar system moves around the galaxy and as it flies through our beautiful Milky Way. So in one of the future videos, we'll try to create this even more realistically, possibly even adding the actual axial tilts to every planet, and maybe even adding moons. But honestly, this is going to really slow down my computer dramatically, and I honestly feel like this is already quite enough. So this is the real solar system as it moves through the galaxy, and I'm going to save this as one of the mods that you can download from Universe Sandbox using Steam with the name Real Motion of the Solar System Through the Galaxy. It's going to be shared on Steam so you can download it and try this for yourself and maybe even improve on it or add more details. So if you have Universe Sandbox, feel free to download it and try this for yourself. Anyway, so on this note, that's kind of it. That's all I wanted to do in this particular video. But like I said, we're going to expand on this and try to make it a little bit more complex in some of the future videos. So do subscribe if you still haven't. Share this video with someone who loves learning about space and sciences, and come back tomorrow to learn something else. I'll see you tomorrow. Space out, and as always.
I hope this one's better.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, that was not very good. And there's one that goes a lot faster.
He's on Michael here. Do you have a better check its current location on?
A lot of lag on that.
Yeah, unfortunately. I'll find a
It's
better
okay.
one. I'll find a
Yeah.
better one because there's one that just shows the sun moving through the galaxy at 400,000 miles per hour, and then the planet spinning around it as it's
Wait a
moving.
minute. So there's now a U.S.
So, sorry for the thing, but I hope that was helpful. So
Yep, that was very much so.
I don't know where he came up with the normal speed of universal formulations and transformative events is 700 million miles per hour. I do not know where he came up with that. And so far, the fastest we've been able to move is 15,000 miles per hour. Normal speed is 46,000 times rocket speed. Therefore, humankind is, relatively speaking, almost as immobile as death. I don't know what that means. On the other hand, his environment facilities may be so ordered by design science as to give him some appreciably large percentage of communication advantage by radio, which operates normally 700 million miles per hour. There we go. The speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. I wonder if that is 7 million miles per hour. I wonder if that's what that is. So if we take a calculator here and we go calculator, and we go 186,000 miles per second, 186 per second. That means that in a minute, we're going 11 million miles a minute. And if we multiply that times 60,
Yeah.
60 times 11 million. So 186,000 times 60 seconds, that gives us speed per minute. And then we'll go, sheet, I can't do it. 180, I'm so sorry, guys. 186,000 times 60 times 60. There we go.
Yep, yep.
700 million. So he took
Mm.
186,000 miles per second, multiplied times my minutes, then multiplied times an hour, and that's where he came up with 7 million miles per hour, 700 million
Yeah.
miles per hour.
Oh,
Pretty close.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to read that again, or you got it? He's just saying everything's moving really fast, right?
yep. In comparison, we are moving as fast as death. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So summarizing, positive design science reformations of the environment must be undertaken with the intent of permitting human beings' innate faculties and facilities to be realized with subconscious coordinations of human beings' organic process. Reform of the environments is undertaken when purpose of defrustrating human beings' innate capabilities, whether the frustration be by the inadequacies of the physical environment or by the coordinated reflex of other human beings, other humans, induced in those humans by the inadequacies of environmental advantages, as far as for instance, a mother's unreasonable punishing of a child, not for the child's direct act, but because the mother's every subconsciously present fear of the future, or for the all history experienced approximately complete poverty, which compounded the parents' drudge wariness and failure of the physical environment to provide any hope of the parents' opportunity to protect the new life that has inadvertently been placed in their care. Whew.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did everybody get that, or shall we read it
Mm.
one more time? Shall I?
No,
Yeah,
no.
one more time, please.
All right, good.
Sorry.
And maybe somebody else can hack through it this time.
Yep,
or-
I'll do it.
All right, good.
So,
Summarizing.
summarizing, positive design science reformations of the environment must be undertaken with the intent of permitting human beings' innate faculties and facilities to be realized with subconscious coordinations of their organic process. Reform
I
of the
understand that.
environment is
Go ahead.
undertaken with purpose of defrustrating human beings' innate capabilities, whether the frustration be by the inadequacies of the physical environment or by the coordinated reflexes of other human beings induced in those human beings by the inadequacies of the environmental advantages, as for instance, a mother's unreasonable punishing of a child, not for the child's direct act, but because of the mother's ever subconsciously present fear of the future, or of the all history experienced approximately complete poverty, which compounded the parents' drudge weariness and failure of the physical environment to provide any hope of the parents' opportunity to protect the new life that has inadvertently been placed in their care.
Cool. Comments or questions on that last paragraph? In other words, we want to devise systems that help us move ahead
Mm.
and not come from fear
Mm.
of failure.
right, right.
Mm. Yep.
Yeah, good. Okay, wonderful. All
We
righty.
got through a lot.
Yeah, we went through a lot. Joe, how you feeling? And what are you going to take away tonight?
There's a lot to take away from this evening. I mean, we started with teleology. I thought we went through some very, very good examples. With I really appreciated the fact of kind of redefining teleology in a more scientific sense with the line generalized, comprehensive, and anticipatory design science. I thought that that was a helpful clarification if we're going to talk about teleology outside of the normal uses of the word. I still like the word purpose to be used when it comes to teleology. I think we overlook purpose, but Bucky's saying design a system with purpose.
Hmm.
So I do appreciate that. I also appreciated the examples that we went into as far as the one thing that we keep coming back to with Bucky is the importance of education, whether it be formal education or the education that we receive through systems and how they influence us. There was a few. There was a concept 3 was about children, actually specifically. So where we talked about how children are conditioned, and I think that's and he goes through a list of statistics in there where he doesn't verify them, but he goes through the human development where 92% of the environment's positive or negative impacts have been wrought upon the new life by the age of 13. That was just one of his lines. 80% have been wrought by the age of 8 and 50% by the age of 4. So anyway, when he's talking about early childhood development, so I would have been, it's a consistent theme that we keep coming back to with the importance of educating, which means it's important to re-educate ourselves in that process. And to really think about the systems that we're creating. I appreciated a lot of the examples that John had come up with, specifically the dam. I liked the examples of sugar as well. I think that was those were both appropriate. And I also I think I got a little bit more clear with regenerative systems. Still need to really kind of think about first principles, generalized principles, and general principles, and how to articulate them in my own words. And that's something that I need to personally work on. And that's something that I am going to work on because I use those words quite a bit, principles anyway. And it's important to understand what the principles are in order for you to make coherent decisions, to understand your own personal principles, but understand the principles in the system that you're operating in. So those are most of my takeaways. They're not all of them. This is actually a very good call. One of my major takeaways is that I'm just very grateful for John's reading. And then I'm going to miss Anne for the next couple of weeks. That I do miss Kelly, and that I miss Manu and Susan. In fact, I start to think that we're closer to oblivion if we don't have either one of them on. So in any case, it's great to see everyone back, and I appreciate the time this evening. And my good friend, how do you feel, and what are you taking away from this evening?
Thank you, Joe. Well, one of them is that I'm really grateful for your, when you share what the takeaway is at the end of every meeting that we have, because you put into you put into words the realizations that actually your realizations make me realize more things. Okay,
Thank you.
so that is one of my biggest takeaway there. And also grateful for both John and Steve, okay, because you take the trouble to really to share the things that you know, right? So that prison thing was such an eye-opener for me today. And Steve, thank you for sharing and taking the trouble, like you know all these things and you take the trouble to share the videos with us, you know. So the content that I took away actually is more than content. It's this whole idea of regenerative and degenerative, right? And I realized that on a superficial level, I was taking both of them as the opposite of. But then both of them have got the good and the bad, right? Both are both okay, like degenerating you for when we die, our bodies degenerate and it goes back into the ground, right? And that's a good thing because all dead matter does that. So it really got me thinking on both ends that they're not good versus bad, but both have got the good and bad, right? So a lot to take away there. And so yeah, that would be my main takeaways. And thank you very much. Yes, and missing the rest of the team who put in so much to our sharing as well. And so John, how do you feel and what is your takeaway?
I'm very grateful to have been here this week, and particularly, Anne, to have you here this week, because I felt that education was a very important part of what we were doing today, more obviously so than usual. And it's triggered a lot of thoughts because I've had various involvement in education. My wife's had various involvement in education, just a couple of things out of there, you know, not reforming the human beings, reforming the environment, I think is really important. Sometimes it's tempting to want to change people. And yeah, it was a very real session that I felt had a lot of relevance to the environment we're in, to the time we're in, the environment we're in, to what's happening around us. And so I'm just grateful to have been part of it and grateful that there were at least 4 of us here. So, Steve, how do you feel and what do you take out of today?
Well, I'm grateful that you guys are all here, and I love it's as I read that, I mean, it's just so overwhelming, and to be able to have different people break it down different ways has been really helpful for me. This has been building up, this idea of teleology normally is the study of a thing in terms of the purpose of a thing rather than the results that it creates. That's the traditional look at it. And what I'm gleaning here is that Bucky really says, okay, it's okay to have purpose, but the purpose needs to be sensitive to the design and the way the universe works. Just to create some philosophical purpose is wonderful, but if I'm really going to be pragmatic, I need to be able to build my design in the context of the way the universe works. And so, and I'm thinking of this concept called morphogenesis. In other words, when you plant an oak seed, it grows up to be a specific tree. It doesn't grow up to be like the tree next to it or like its parent tree. It grows up to be that tree. Each human DNA molecule grows into its unique being, but there is an overall design to that growth, and that's what we call morphogenesis. That's one of the terms that's used in biology. What makes that tree be that tree as it grows up? And the way I like to look at it is that if I look at that tree in terms of 4 dimensions instead of 3 dimensions, and if I assume that the 4th dimension has something to do with time. So as I look at the tree, I see it as the seed, as the little startling, and then as this tree over time. There's the design. When I move into the big picture, and if I'm willing to look at the tree as a seedling and the tree as a mature tree, there's its design right there. And I'm right here in 3D looking at that tree, and I could think, okay, that's the tree, but that's not the tree. The tree is the whole thing. And I think that's what Bucky is trying to get us to do, is to look at the whole thing. my other big thing today was because I have been one of the, I mean, if you'd have asked me before this call about regenerative, I would have always thought of regenerative in positive terms, always. And yet Bucky today says unfavorably regenerative. And this idea that things can be regenerative positively and be regenerative negatively, that was a big, huge zap for me. The other thing, and kind of Joe brought this up a little bit, because we hear all the time now, you get all these brainy new people, and if you, as I do YouTube, everybody's talking about first principles. Elon Musk talks about first principles. You know, Lex Friedman. You get all these guys involved in artificial intelligence. They're all talking about first principles. And I'm kind of getting an idea that
Ray
maybe,
Dalio.
it's what?
Ray Dalio as well.
Ray Dalio. Yeah, I've seen his name on YouTube. What did he do?
He has the biggest hedge fund in the world.
Oh, the biggest what?
Hedge fund in the world.
Oh, he has the biggest hedge fund in the world. And he likes to talk about.
But he calls it first. That's his book is titled First Principles.
Oh, is it really?
Or Principles, yeah.
And so I'm seeing a relationship between first principles and generalized principles. I think Bucky was talking about first principles, but he was doing it in 1965 before that book was written. So I've had a couple of really huge takeaways today. I missed Adrian. Let me see. Andre, isn't that who you recommend? I missed Andre today. I missed Julian today. I missed Raffers today, besides everybody else we mentioned. Let's hope they all come on the call next time. And that's wonderful because your invitee there has generated a lot of good feedback on this call. So Andre has done a really good job. So I appreciate that. You guys are my heroes. Best wishes to Kelly, and we'll see you all next week. Oh, by the way, in the thing, I forgot to push it. There's a really good video on the solar movement and the sun moving through the galaxy. There's the one I was looking for, and it's in the. If you want to click on that link right there, I will put it in the. I'll put it in the email I sent up. Okay.
Yeah, and I also put in there. There's a guy that talks about. It's a little bit of the Prussian schooling system, but the homeschooling system actually has picked up a lot of movement in the United States, all over. It's like really picked up a lot. By alarming numbers. There was somebody from MIT that put out a lot of numbers, but this guy, Joshua Stemley or something like that.
Yeah.
Part of the Mormon church, actually.
Really?
Yeah, he really talks about how our school system was based on Prussian principles. And he goes into as to why he's educating his kids.
I've got that link right here. And I'm going to go ahead and post it in. You gave us the clue. I posted that in, and there's the link for it right there.
Is that it?
And yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it's worth a
It's
quick
TED Talk.
look. I mean, it's there is a movement that's actually really gaining traction in the United States. And I don't know if that's, yeah, he was in Hong Kong when he gave that talk. I remember that.
Good.
He's
Well,
actually, I
thank
think
you.
he's a,
It's only 16 minutes long, so it's going to be worth it.
Thank you. Yep. I'll check it out.
yeah, and he
Mhm.
talks about entrepreneurship, I think, in there too.
Cool.
Mhm.
I'll tell you, the last 2 minutes are the best.
That's right.
See
We'll
you
have to
guys.
call
you.
John
Thank you
and
so
tell
much,
him. We'll have to
everybody.
call John and tell him.
Bye-bye.
Good night,
Take
everyone.
care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.